Okay, let's just jump right in. When you pick up the Gospel of Mark,
Yeah.
it's a real shock to the system, isn't it? Especially if you're coming from, say, Luke's Gospel.
Oh, absolutely. Luke feels like he's a historian, very careful, very detailed.
Right, or John with those long, beautiful, almost philosophical speeches. And then you hit Mark, and it's not a biography, it's an adrenaline rush.
It really is. It's the action movie of the New Testament. It is just breathless.
Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. The word immediately, I think it's euthys in the Greek. It shows up something like, what, 40 times?
It's relentless. He never stops moving.
Never. Jesus is healing, he's casting out demons, he's hopping on a boat, he's climbing a mountain. It's just cut, 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 scene after scene. And I think, honestly, because of that pace, it's so easy to read Mark as just a chaotic collection of stories,
Compilation tape, yeah.
like Jesus's greatest hits, with not a lot of thought put into the actual order.
And that is the most common perception. You know, people read it and think, okay, here's a cool thing Jesus did, and then immediately after, here's another cool thing. It feels so spontaneous.
But that's the assumption we're going to challenge today.
That's exactly it. Because if you actually hit pause on that action movie and you look at the frame by frame, you start to realize this isn't random at all. It is it's a highly sophisticated architectural masterpiece.
And that is the whole mission for this deep dive. We are going to slow the film down. We're going to x-ray the Gospel of Mark. We want to find the hidden structure, the actual roadmap he's following. And we want to look at this secret identity that Jesus keeps trying to hush up.
And maybe most fascinatingly, the way Mark goes about claiming Jesus is God without ever actually using the word God.
It's the ultimate show don't tell, isn't it?
Exactly.
So to help us navigate all this, we've got a pretty massive stack of research today. We're pulling from some theological essays by Joel Williams on the narrative structure.
Right, and David Evans on how Mark uses the Old Testament like a remix artist.
We also have Edward Adams on the very controversial coming of the Son of Man, and some really heavy historical rebuttals from James Rochford on the famous Messianic Secret.
It is a heavy stack. We've got literary detective work colliding with some pretty high-stakes history here.
So let's start with that architecture, because I've definitely heard scholars describe Mark as, well, a bit of a mess, or at least unstructured. Is there actually a map here, or are we just sort of seeing patterns where there aren't any?
Well, mess might be a little harsh, but there is a genuine scholarly debate here, for sure. On one side, you've got scholars like Joanna Dewey,
Okay.
and her argument is that we have to remember Mark was originally an oral text. It wasn't written to be, studied quietly in a library. It was written to be read aloud, performed, maybe around a fire.
So it's pure storytelling.
Exactly. So she describes Mark as an interwoven tapestry or an oriental carpet. Her point is that because it's oral, it naturally loops back on itself. It has these overlapping patterns. It has forecasts and echoes of things to come. But you're not going to find a clean, straight line outline. It's more like a web of stories. And it's designed to keep a listening audience engaged, just moving them from one exciting moment to the next without a rigid path.
Which makes a lot of sense, right? If you're telling a story to a crowd, you have to loop themes to remind them of what you said 20 minutes ago.
It does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then you get scholars like Joel Williams who come in and say, no, look closer. Williams argues that Mark is very much a journey. It's a path. It has a specific starting point, a travel time, and a very, very specific destination. And his whole point is that if you treat it like a web or a carpet, you miss the progression.
You miss the forward motion.
You miss the forward motion. And you miss how the character of Jesus, or at least the revelation of his character, evolves strictly based on where you are in the book.
So Williams is saying there is a deliberate chronological and geographical map.
Precisely. And if you don't follow that map, you completely misinterpret the hero of the story.
Okay, so if we buy into the Williams theory that this is a map, where's the big "you are here" sign, where's the turning point that proves this structure actually exists?
The hinge of the entire gospel is in chapter 8, specifically verses 27 through 30. This is the moment at Caesarea Philippi.
Right.
Jesus turns to his disciples out in the middle of nowhere, and he asks the ultimate question, "Who do you say I am?"
And Peter, of course, gives the right answer. He says, "You are the Messiah."
He does. And Williams, and honestly, most scholars today point out that this single moment splits the entire gospel into two completely distinct halves. It's like an intermission in a play. You have the before and the after.
And the difference between them is pretty stark.
It's jarring.
So let's break down the before. This is chapters 1 all the way through the first half of chapter 8. What are we watching in this first half?
In the first half, the focus is entirely on Jesus as the powerful Messiah. Geographically, we're in the wilderness, we're in Galilee, we're around the Sea of Galilee. This is his home turf.
And the action matches that geography. It's all about power.
The action is loud. It's just relentless miracles. It's authority over demons. It's him calming storms with a word, healing sickness, raising the dead.
And the response from the people.
Absolute amazement. Crowds are flocking to him from everywhere. It's like a rock concert wherever he goes. Everyone wants a piece of this powerful miracle worker.
It's the honeymoon phase. It's all about success, crowds, power. If the movie ended at chapter 8, it would basically be a superhero origin story.
In a way, yeah. But then we hit that hinge. Peter says, "You are the Messiah." And immediately there's that word again. The entire tone of the book shifts.
So this is the after, the second half of the book,
Yeah.
chapters 8 through 16.
And now the focus shifts completely from the powerful Messiah to the suffering Son of God.
And the geography changes too.
The geography changes. We leave Galilee. We are now explicitly on the way to Jerusalem. And in Mark, Jerusalem isn't just a city, it's the destination of doom. It's where the temple is, where the trial will be, and ultimately where the cross is.
So what happens to all those miracles, the big, loud displays of power?
They drop off significantly. The action changes from performing these huge miracles to teaching about suffering and discipleship. He stops dazzling the crowds and starts warning the disciples.
He starts talking about dying.
Over and over, he predicts his death 3 times. And the response from everyone changes too. It goes from amazement to just total misunderstanding, rejection, fear.
Oh, that is a huge shift. It's almost like you've spliced 2 different movies together. The first one is, look at this powerful king, and the second one is, watch this king die.
And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Williams points out that the characterization of everyone changes. In the first half, Jesus is the hero of the crowds. In the second half, the crowds turn on him. But here's the irony, and this is so crucial for understanding Mark's architecture.
Go on.
As Jesus moves closer to his death, which by any human standard is a total failure, his true identity actually becomes clearer.
Right, because in the first half, everyone loves him, but nobody really gets him. They just like the magic show.
Exactly. They see the power, but they don't see the person. And in the second half, the disciples, the insiders who are supposed to understand, they stop understanding him entirely.
They get so confused.
They're completely confused by all the talk of suffering. They start arguing about who's the greatest right after Jesus predicts his own execution. They're completely blind to what kind of Messiah he actually is.
And this leads to that incredible, just staggering irony at the very end. The one person in the entire gospel who finally looks at Jesus and says the words, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Who is it?
It's not Peter. It's not James or John. It's not one of his followers.
No.
It's a Roman centurion, a Gentile, an enemy, standing at the foot of the cross watching Jesus die.
Wow.
That is the destination of Mark's roadmap. The profound realization that you cannot understand Jesus' power until you understand his suffering. The structure forces you, the reader, to grapple with that exact paradox.
That is, well, it's brilliant writing, for one. But it also connects to something that has always bothered me about Mark. You mentioned that Jesus keeps trying to hush people up.
Yes, the famous Messianic Secret.
Yeah. He heals a leper and says, "Don't tell anyone." He casts out a demon who shouts, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." And Jesus just says, "Quiet."
It happens over and over and over again, to demons, to people he's healed, even to his own disciples after Peter's confession.
It seems so counterintuitive. Why, if you're the Messiah, surely you want good PR, you want the word out. Why all the secrecy?
This exact puzzle is what really launched modern Markan scholarship. Back in 1901, a German scholar named Wilhelm Reed came up with a very, very controversial theory to explain this.
Oh, okay, what was his take?
Well, Reed was a skeptic, and he argued that the historical Jesus, the actual man who lived, never claimed to be the Messiah.
Hey, what? He didn't claim it at all, but the whole New Testament is about that.
According to Reed, no. He thought Jesus was maybe a great teacher or prophet who got on the wrong side of the law. But the early church, years later, they came to believe he was the Messiah. So when they sat down to write the Gospels, they had a massive continuity error to fix.
The error being that nobody during Jesus' life seemed to treat him like the Messiah.
Precisely. If he really was the Messiah, why didn't anyone recognize it back then? So Reed claimed that the author of Mark invented this shh, don't tell anyone motif as a literary cover-up. It was a retcon.
A retcon, like in a comic book where they change a character's backstory years later to make the new story fit.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Reed's theory was, oh, he was the Messiah all along. He just Told everyone to keep it a secret. That's why nobody knew.
That feels incredibly cynical. Is there a rebuttal to that? Because that pretty much undermines the entire narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Our source, James Rochford, along with many, many historians, pushes back hard on this, and they start with a basic fact check.
Okay.
As a matter of historical fact, the idea that Jesus made no messianic claims just doesn't hold up.
What's the evidence?
Well, the title Son of Man, which we'll get into, is itself a huge claim to cosmic authority. But even more historically, look at the trial before the Sanhedrin. The high priest asks him directly, "Are you the Messiah?" And Jesus says, "I am."
And then there's the execution itself.
Right. The Romans crucified him with a sign, a titulus, above his head that said, "King of the Jews."
That's a good point. The Romans didn't execute itinerant moral teachers. They executed political rivals. They crucified people for sedition.
Exactly. You don't get crucified for secrets. You get crucified for claiming to be a king. So if we accept that Jesus did view himself as the Messiah, we're back to the original question. Why the silence? Why tell the leper to zip it?
And Rochford suggests there are actually very practical reasons for this.
3 practical reasons and 1 very deep theological one. Let's start with the practical. Number 1, definition control.
Meaning?
You have to remember what the word Messiah meant to a first-century Jew living under Roman occupation.
It wasn't primarily a spiritual term?
Not at all. They weren't waiting for a savior to forgive their sins so they could go to heaven. They were waiting for a conquering king, a military leader, a new King David who would smash the Roman legions and restore Israel to political glory.
So if Jesus stands up in Mark chapter 1 and shouts, "Good news, everyone, I am the Messiah," the crowd doesn't hear, "I'm here to save your soul."
No.
They hear, "Grab your swords. The war against Rome starts today."
Exactly. They would have hijacked his entire movement immediately. Jesus needed time to completely redefine the job description of Messiah from conquering king to suffering servant before he could let that title loose. If he broadcast it too early, the movement becomes a violent insurrection, which is the exact opposite of what he wanted.
That makes total sense. It's a branding issue. What's reason number 2?
Crowd control.
Yeah.
Pure logistics. Look at what happens in Mark 1.45. Jesus heals a leper, tells him to be quiet, and what does the leper do?
He goes out and blabs to everyone.
And what's the result? The text says Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places.
His fame actually got in the way of his mission.
It completely hindered it. He couldn't teach, he couldn't move, he couldn't disciple the 12 because he was just being mobbed by people who wanted a free miracle. He became a celebrity artifact. The silence was necessary just to get his work done.
Okay, and the third practical reason?
Rome. Plain and simple. Claiming to be a king was treason. If Jesus had declared open kingship too early, Pontius Pilate would have had him arrested and executed in chapter 2. His ministry would have been over before it began. The silence bought him time.
So definition control, crowd control, and avoiding execution. Those are all very practical. But you said there was a deeper theological reason.
And this is where it all circles back to the roadmap we talked about earlier. Reed, the skeptic, thought the secret was a clumsy cover-up. But most scholars today argue the secret is a massive theological point.
Okay.
Mark is telling the reader, you cannot understand who Jesus is by his miracles alone.
Because miracles just prove power, and they were expecting a powerful Messiah.
Right. If you think he's the Messiah just because he can walk on water, you fundamentally misunderstood him. You'll fall into the same trap as the first-century crowds and think he's the conquering king.
So the secret is only lifted when?
At the cross. Because the cross is the only lens through which Jesus' true identity makes any sense. Mark is basically saying, don't you dare put a label on me until you see me die, or you'll get the label completely wrong.
That connects perfectly to the next section of our stack. Because even though he's quiet about the title Messiah, our source, David Evans, argues that Mark has Jesus being very, very loud about something else.
Implicit Christology.
Or as the outline puts it, God in disguise.
Yes. You know, in the Gospel of John, Jesus says things like, I and the Father are one. It's explicit. Mark is much more subtle. He uses what Evans calls implicit Christology. He constantly uses Old Testament allusions to claim Jesus is God without ever saying the words.
He's remixing the Hebrew Bible to place Jesus right in the center of it.
That's a perfect way to put it. He's a master remix artist.
So let's look at the prologue. Mark 1, verses 1 through 3. It sounds like a pretty standard introduction. Prepare the way for the Lord.
It sounds standard, but it's a brilliant remix. Evans points out that Mark is actually conflating 3 different Old Testament texts here. Exodus 23, Malachi 3, and Isaiah 40.
A theological mashup.
It's a theological mashup.
Yeah.
And in the original Old Testament context, all three of those verses are about Yahweh God himself coming to visit his people. Isaiah 40 says, prepare the way for Yahweh.
And Mark takes those verses
And applies them directly to Jesus. So when John the Baptist cries out, prepare the way for the Lord, Mark is telling anyone with ears to hear that Jesus is that Lord. He is Yahweh showing up in the desert. He's putting Jesus in the slot that was reserved for God Almighty.
And then immediately after that, we get the baptism, the voice from heaven. You are my son whom I love. With you I am well pleased.
Another mashup. This is just brilliant. The Father's voice combines three different Old Testament texts into one single sentence to give Jesus his mission statement, his job description, right at the outset.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the first part, you are my son. That's a direct quote from Psalm 2.7.
The coronation song.
Exactly. It's the psalm for the crowning of the king, the Messiah. So number one, he's the king.
Authority. Okay.
The second part, with you I am well pleased. That line is pulled straight from Isaiah 42.1, which is the introduction of the suffering servant.
So, king and suffering servant.
And then the phrase beloved son, that phrase powerfully echoes Genesis 22.2. Do you remember that story?
That's Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah. God tells Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love.
And sacrifice him.
Whoa.
So in one single sentence, before Jesus has done a single miracle, the voice from heaven identifies him as the king who will suffer and who will be the sacrificial son. The entire gospel plot is right there in verse 11.
That is incredibly dense. And then, once his ministry actually starts, he begins doing things that...
Well, they cross a line, don't they? They absolutely cross a line. Take Mark chapter 2. The story of the paralytic who is lowered through the roof. Jesus doesn't just say, get up and walk. He looks at the man and says, son, your sins are forgiven.
And the scribes who are there just freak out. They think, this is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone?
And this is what's so clever about Mark's writing. He wants the reader to realize the scribes are right.
They're right.
Their theology is 100% correct. Only God can forgive sins that are ultimately committed against God. So by forgiving the man, Jesus is arrogating a divine prerogative to himself. He is acting as God. He's not just claiming to be a messenger from God.
And then we get the walking on water in Mark 6. I have to admit, I've always read that as just a really cool miracle. Like, look, anti-gravity. But Evans says there is way more going on under the surface.
Oh, there is such deep theology happening here. First, Mark says that Jesus intended to pass them by. Now, that just sounds weird. Why would he walk all the way out to them in the middle of a storm just to walk past them? Was he, ignoring them?
Yeah, like, luck with the storm, guys. See ya.
No. It's an illusion. It's a technical term. Think back to Exodus 33 and 34. Moses asks to see God's glory. And God says, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you. Or 1 Kings 19, where God passes by the prophet Elijah on the mountain. In the Old Testament, God passing by is the technical term for a theophany, a visible revelation of divine glory.
So Jesus walking on the water isn't just a rescue mission. It's a self-revelation. He is showing them his divine glory.
And specifically that he's doing it by walking on the sea. Evans connects this directly to Job 9.8, which says, God alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea.
God alone.
God alone. So if Jesus is trampling the waves, who is he implicitly claiming to be? And if that wasn't enough, when he speaks to them to calm their terror, he says, take courage, it is I.
It is I.
Which in the Greek is ego eimi, literally I am.
The divine name from the burning bush in Exodus.
The divine name. So in one short event, he's walking on the chaos water like the God of Job. He's revealing his glory like the God of Exodus. And he's using the divine name, I am. That is not subtle. It's implicit, but it's loud.
It's deafening if you know your Old Testament.
It is. And yet, Mark adds that tragic little footnote. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. They completely missed it. They saw it all and thought he was a ghost.
Because they were still looking for a political messiah, not for God in the flesh.
Exactly. They just didn't have the categories for it.
So we've got the structure, we've got the secret, we've got the hidden identity as Yahweh. Now we have to talk about the title Jesus actually uses for himself. Because he rarely calls himself Messiah or Son of God. He keeps calling himself the Son of Man.
14 times in Mark alone. It is far and away his favorite self-designation.
And honestly, to our modern ears, Son of Man sounds kind of humble, almost weak, like I'm just a human guy. I'm a son of a man.
And that ambiguity was incredibly useful. It allowed him to fly under the Roman radar. Son of Man didn't sound like King of the Jews. It didn't immediately sound like treason. But biblically, it is absolutely loaded with meaning.
Our source material for this section breaks Jesus' use of this title down into three main categories.
Right. The first category is using it to speak of his earthly authority. So he'll say, the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, or that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. That establishes his power on earth.
Okay, so that's category one. What's two?
Category two is suffering. And this is actually the dominant use in Mark's gospel. Over and over he says, the Son of Man must suffer. This was the real shocker for everyone.
They did not see that coming.
Not at all. Because in pre-Christian Judaism, there's absolutely no connection between the glorious figure of the Son of Man and the idea of suffering. It was like saying the general must surrender or the king must be executed. It just didn't compute.
So that leaves the third category.
Apocalyptic glory, the Son of Man coming in the clouds.
And this brings us to the key text, Daniel chapter 7.
Yes, this is the key that unlocks the entire title. In Daniel 7, Daniel has this incredible vision. He sees one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. And he approaches the Ancient of Days, that's God, and he is given authority, glory, and a kingdom that will never, ever end.
So this figure in Daniel is a cosmic heavenly ruler.
He is. He receives universal worship from all nations. So when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he isn't saying, I'm just a guy. He is claiming to be that cosmic figure from Daniel 7. He is laying claim to heavenly enthronement and universal dominion.
It's basically a secret code that claims universal power while sounding humble.
That's a great way to put it. It's a title that implies both a distinctness from God, he approaches the Ancient of Days, but also a profound unity with God's rule and authority.
Which brings us to probably the most controversial part of our stack today, the end times, the coming of the Son of Man that Jesus talks about in Mark 13 and 14.
Right. This is where the scholars really duke it out.
So, Jesus says, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, traditionally, for centuries, Christians read that and think, second coming, end of the world, Jesus coming back down to earth.
That's the standard interpretation. But a number of very influential scholars, like R.T. France and N.T. Wright, they argue, not so fast. Look at the direction of travel in Daniel 7.
What's their argument there?
They look very closely at the source text, Daniel 7. And in Daniel's vision, where does the Son of Man go? He comes with the clouds to the Ancient of Days.
He goes up to God in heaven.
He goes up. It's an ascent. So France and Wright argue that when Jesus speaks of the coming of the Son of Man, he's not talking about coming down to earth at the end of time. He's talking about his vindication, his ascension to God's throne after his resurrection.
So they would say this prophecy was fulfilled in the 1st century?
Yes. They argue it refers to Jesus being vindicated by God after his death. And they often connect it to the judgment on Jerusalem in AD 70, the destruction of the temple, as the historical proof that Jesus was enthroned as king and that the old religious leaders were wrong.
Okay, that interpretation changes everything. But we have a counter-argument in our stack from a scholar named Edward Adams.
You do. And Adams says, hold on, you're forgetting that Mark is a remix artist. Look at the other texts he's mixing in.
Because it's never just one Old Testament text with him.
It's never just one. Adams points out that Mark mixes Daniel 7 with Zechariah 14.5.
And what does Zechariah 14 say?
It says, the Lord will come and all his holy ones with him. Now, in Zechariah, that is definitely unambiguously God coming down to earth for a final judgment.
With descent.
A clear descent.
Yeah.
And Adams notes that in Mark 8.38 and Mark 13.26, Jesus talks about coming with the holy angels, coming with an entourage like a king.
Like a divine warrior.
Exactly. In Daniel 7, the Son of Man comes to the angels who are in God's court. But in Mark, he comes with the angels as his army. Adams argues this completely shifts the direction of travel. He says Mark is envisioning a literal cosmic second coming, the parousia, where Jesus takes on the role of the divine warrior coming from heaven to earth to judge.
So Adams argues that Mark is building a full 5-step narrative arc for Jesus.
Yes, it moves from 1, authority on earth, to 2, suffering and death, to 3, resurrection. Then 4, he's seated at the right hand. That's the Daniel 7 ascent, the vindication. But it doesn't end there. The arc is completed by step 5, which is his coming again, the parousia.
So he goes up so that he can eventually come back down.
Precisely. It completes the entire loop of his mission.
This is just fascinating because it ties the whole gospel together so tightly. You start with this hidden roadmap, this journey from power to suffering. You have the secret identity that can only be understood through the lens of the cross. You have this implicit coded claim to be Yahweh himself. And it all culminates in this promise that the suffering servant will return as the cosmic judge.
It's an incredibly tight, sophisticated piece of theological writing. It is so much more than just a chaotic collection of stories. It's a unified vision of salvation history.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's just circle back to that final irony you mentioned, the centurion.
It really is the masterstroke of Mark's gospel, I think. You spend 16 chapters watching the insiders, the disciples, get it wrong at every single turn.
Every turn.
They want the power, they reject the suffering, they fall asleep in Gethsemane, they run away when he's arrested. Peter, his right-hand man, denies he even knows him.
They are completely blind.
They are blind. And then, at the moment of Jesus' absolute weakness, when he is dead on a Roman cross, stripped, beaten, executed as a common criminal, who is the one person who finally sees the truth.
An outsider, an enemy, a component of the Roman machine that just killed him.
A Roman centurion. He sees the suffering, he sees how Jesus died, and he says, surely this man was the Son of God.
Mark is telling us then that the Messianic secret isn't solved by seeing a miracle, it's solved by seeing the sacrifice.
Exactly. That is the only place the secret is finally lifted, at the cross.
Which leaves us, the reader, with the same question Jesus asks Peter and the question Mark leaves hanging in the air at the end of his book. Who do you say that I am?
And that's the question that just haunts you after you put the book down.
So here's a final provocative thought to chew on. We talked about why Jesus kept the secret, to prevent people from following him for all the wrong reasons. They wanted political power, they wanted free healthcare, they wanted to see a magic show.
Right. You wanted followers, not just fans.
So if Jesus were here today in our modern church culture, what secrets do you think he would be keeping from us?
Ooh, that is a dangerous question.
I mean, are we following the conquering king because we want to win a culture war? Are we following the miracle worker because we just want our best life now? And if we are, would Jesus be hiding his true identity from us, waiting to see if we're willing to follow the suffering servant instead?
Are we willing to walk that road to Jerusalem? Or do we just want to stay in Galilee where it's safe and exciting and popular?
Something to think about. That's it for this deep dive into the Gospel of Mark. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.